My name is Dona Park, and I'm a local artist based in Abbotsford, and I have been part of this Black Lives Matter art project at UFV. I found about this opportunity through Instagram, actually, and I didn't realize that it was UFV affiliated until I started conversing with our cohort. I thought that it would be really important to get involved with something that fights against racial injustice, since my work in peace and conflict also influences my perspective, and that's what I have been involved with in the past 3 to 4 years, is fighting against racial injustice or participating or leading anti-racism trainings in my university back in the States. But also I was involved in kind of racial reconciliation work with an organization I used to intern for and volunteer for. So getting connected back with my local community in Abbotsford was super important to saying that there is racial injustice here too, and we need to speak about Black Lives Matter. So as a child, I realized that there were racial injustices towards people who look like me or people of color, but I didn't really have the language of race to identify that, oh, this is a systemic issue. It's not just an isolated incident where people of color seem to be making complaints about something. But when I got my education, I studied history. I realized that racial injustices are so connected with the history of any country. And since I studied in the United States, African American history was one of the highlights to my education. And at that moment, I experienced and witnessed Black Lives Matter. I participated in other social justice movements. And that kind of opened my eyes to thinking that there is a lot of systemic racism. My identity is intertwined with the racial injustice. My identity is also intertwined with Black Lives Matter movement. So yeah, that's a very brief summary of how my identity formed. And I realized the importance of intersectionality and that we need to constantly support injustices that happen towards other groups, because in the end, it also affects our power dynamics too. So I grew up in a small city called Elkhart and Goshen in Midwest Indiana in the United States. And in that context, I felt like microaggressions or perhaps systemic racism was very visible through to, evidence of redlining, gentrification policies. There's a term called sundown town, which is also a very highly racial issue and conflict that occurred in these small cities. And in that context, you can totally see like, oh, somebody who will do some racial aggression towards me, then I can call out like, that's racist. Oh, this city is like gentrified. There's a lot of African Americans living in this city versus it's very white in a different city. So like, it's very evident. However, when I can call these things out in these small towns, I can also call them out here in Canada, because we do have this facade of diversity, everybody holding hands, multiculturalism. You know, if you go to elementary school, they'll have like a diversity parade and it looks good. However, we don't talk about the underlying issues and the history that also occurred here. There are various racialized policies. And yeah, that's how I see racism is not just an isolated United States issue. It totally extends to communities here, and we need to work on repairing those relationships. Also, accountability and reparations are important things to mention. So the prime inspiration for my piece, Gentle Night, was inspired by a couple of artists and creatives in the Black community, and namely the singer Eartha Kitt comes to mind. She sang a song called Black Little Angels, and I'll just quote it right now. She says, "When I walk into a church, I only see paintings of white angels. Why?" And I thought that was such an impactful statement. And for somebody from her time period to speak about this kind of question in a creative way was very inspiring. And I wanted to incorporate these elements of little black angels, little Tootie just floating in the sky, kind of as guardians. And the concept of mother and child is obviously universal, and it's very, I think it encompasses a lot of the strength in relationships that I see with certain communities. And a mother holding child evokes the idea of Madonna and child too. So there's all these religious components, and I think bringing in even the idea of Madonna and child shows that there's agency within that kind of institutional framework of religion. We see religion as harmful, but at the same time, in the Black community, it was one of the ways that people could gather and communicate and relate and express their emotions. So I wanted to touch on that topic, especially in the context of nighttime, because we traditionally see nighttime as a dangerous place, and it's with all the horrifying things happening to the Black community these days, I think it's easy to try to portray nighttime as dangerous. If somebody goes out at night and they're wearing a hoodie and they go to a 7-Eleven, I don't think they feel safe. So I wanted to turn those concepts around and say, no, the night is beautiful. Black is beautiful. The stars, they shine, and they shine for you. And yeah, those ideas I incorporated, but I also want to touch back onto the lyrics that I shared. When I walk into a church, I only see paintings of Black angels. Why? Because that's also a song, or I think it's a poem that's quoted by Andres Eloy Blanco, because it's a theme against racial discrimination. And combining these elements of Black is beautiful and the night time is tender and beautiful, soft, comforting instead of the trauma and danger that we all see in the newspaper. I just wanted to kind of subvert those ideas, challenge stereotypes, challenge the idea of how the media constantly portrays the Black community, and make it into something a little bit more beautiful and gentle and perhaps a little bit therapeutic. As for the medium, I used acrylic painting, and other notes about it, it's kind of, as an artist, I like to use whatever is at hand. If somebody gave me oil paints, if somebody gave me acrylics or inks, that would just become another medium to tell my story or the message I want to share. So I'm not really restricted to my medium, and I just wanted to explore something with acrylics. I know some people have shared with me the colors I used and the textures I used. It reminds them of oil painting, but the truth is that it's just acrylic painting. So I touched on the nighttime aspect of this painting, and obviously blue is a very natural color to select to portray the night. And before, I had played around with different colors. So when I started the painting, it was actually a very pastel blue. And the figure in the middle, I think she had a pink dress on too. But because I wanted to evoke night and darkness as something gorgeous and vibrant, I think it just naturally came to me to use a deep set blue in contrast with a red dress. Yeah. I should also mention that the quote at the top is by Langston Hughes, and I wanted to use a Black artist who is a monolith in the literary community, and incorporated his poem too. And it says, "When night comes on gently, dark like me, that is my dream." And I am obsessed with the idea of dreams and reveries, and they hold kind of a mystical symbol. And I thought it would be fun, but also spiritual in a way, to have that underlying, or I guess overlaying theme in my painting. And simultaneously, it's very natural for me to also incorporate nature, because I don't know, I think humanity in general, we need nature to survive and we need nature to thrive on. And I just feel like that's an all-encompassing theme for me in all of my works. So that's just a natural part of my artwork. I think Martin Luther King Jr. said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That quote should apply to everyone who has empathy, who has an inclination for justice for marginalized people. And depending on the context, sure, Canada maybe isn't as vocal about it. Perhaps the population is too small. We don't have a systemic history of slavery in comparison to the US. However, injustices exist here too. And I think they're very highly racial. And we have, we need to keep on amplifying issues for Indigenous groups. We have to amplify issues for people of color, including Black communities, because again, like colonialism perpetrated a lot of racial imbalances and weird power dynamics. So why not speak about it here? Like this painting is highly applicable to any anti-racial attacks here. And I'm speaking from a place as an Asian person and hearing about like anti-Asian sentiment. So if like those are highly motivated racial attacks against people who look like me, but what's to say it doesn't impact other communities either? So Black Lives Matter is not just a US only phenomenon. It extends to here and we need to keep on speaking about it because it exists. Racism exists. It's poisonous, but it's also pervasive. And until, everybody needs to recognize that and realize that. And until that is gone and derooted, that's when we stop protesting. That's when we stop making BLM art. So I mentioned that my identity is as a racialized person, and that carries a lot of assumptions. People ask me, oh, you're so political, or why are you making this about identity politics? And I always like to respond, well, I didn't choose my identity, right? We're always given it. We don't have a choice. And being political is also not a choice if your identity, since the moment you're born, is kind of defined and labeled for you by other people. And so I think it extends to Black Lives Matter because I am a racialized person and I am also under this hierarchy of white supremacy. And it's important to recognize that we share this like same stream of history. We're all part of the same history. And although I can't say that my history is the same as the Black community or different people of color, I can say we're on the same history line and we need to keep on working together to challenge systemic oppression and to call out issues of racial injustices. So in that way, I think I'd like to emphasize intersectionality and knowing your own history. Like, I don't think I would have been aware of my connection to the Black Lives Matter rallies and protests until I learned my own history of Asian immigrants. And there's so many discrimination policies, like obviously I'm not Chinese, but there was a Chinese Exclusion Act, and there were riots in Vancouver that affected these communities who have been there for years as well. So yeah, as somebody who may not be Chinese, but always am mistaken as one, and someone who looks more East Asian, despite having Canadian citizenship, I do empathize with that mentality of feeling like a perpetual foreigner. And how does it look for people who are not Asian, but who feel that same way, to come together? And yeah, that's the hope that I carry when I create my artwork, is that even within marginalized groups, we can find rapport and speak out for each other and protect ourselves. And that touches on Adrian Rain's painting titled we protect ourselves, or the theme is we protect ourselves. And that's a very powerful statement that also touches on intersectionality. So two of our mentors, Shelley and Desiree, they've been guiding us through this process all along. And I think most of the planning should be credited to Shelley for the opening launch. And yeah, it was a good turnout. I think despite the pandemic, and I didn't really know what to expect, but it was encouraging to hear the dean and other faculty and other supporters of this project to say their positive reviews. But I was also very challenged by what Adrian shared in his speech too, on how we need to be accountable, we need to financially vote with our money to contribute to organizations that support BIPOC communities or Black Lives Matter. And yeah, I'm glad that he shared that in this kind of setting, because I think UFE is also an institution, and with institutions, there's always dust and hidden skeletons. So to call that out and to challenge that in the face of this community was very impactful. And I think we need to keep on doing that. The last thing I'd like to share about this is probably a call to action. If there is a protest, go to the protest. People need bodies to show physical support. We can't just talk without walking there. And like I mentioned before about financial reparations, we need to financially contribute to help these communities because they have been rejected by the government. There is no stable support system for issues like this because of systemic racism embedded in so many institutions that it just becomes very skewed. So for people in Abbotsford or in the Fraser Valley, if you do see racial harassment or aggressions, please call them out, because it's very comfortable to not say anything and just watch things happen. And that's what we're accustomed to, especially in our little circles and family groups or friend groups. But there's always, if you have a family too, there's always incidents of racism, and it just kind of goes under the table. But I would highly challenge people to create conversation around that. It doesn't have to be a huge conflict, but it could be a discussion. So I think my painting is just here to be a call for action, to inspire people, but also challenge people to get uncomfortable and to get their hands dirty in contributing to fixing this issue that has been long going since hundreds of years. So that's the least we can do. So the quote is by Langston Hughes, and he wrote in his poem, "When night comes on gently, dark like me, that is my dream." And I think that quote and my piece, they both resonate a tranquility of the darkness, where darkness, the color black, as well as the nighttime, is always seen as a very dangerous time. But when you're in the comfort of your mother, or if you're in the comfort of nature, nighttime is just merely another beautiful moment in our day. So it's really important for me to create a very feminine figure, and I wanted to also incorporate a baby child. There's always often that phrase, I've seen it a lot in media, where Black men, they're murdered by the police, or they're in the incarceration system where they're just villainized as very scary people or as villains and the other. But we always forget that everybody is a child and everybody is beautiful. It's always in those contexts they just seem to vilify and demonize people, and that affects the whole community, and that's another barrier of racial stereotypes. But I didn't want to touch on those sceneries and imageries. I wanted to create the cohesiveness and the trust between a mother and child. and the beauty of it, and how I believe that in many BIPOC communities, as well as the Black community, that the figure of mother is extremely important as the nourisher, as a life giver, as a leader who speaks out about these issues, but also the first person who shares love between their child. And how, yeah, I just wanted to emphasize on the beauty of that. And I also created these decorations for the flowers, just to show the harmony between Black communities, Black people, and nature, as well as other BIPOC folks as well. That we are surrounded by nature and we are codependent with nature. And I feel like this connection to the environment and natural world is also quite liberating, away from cement jungles, away from the very harsh, brutal structures that people create. So wanted to show off the environment aspect of it.